final section in Kelley Lesson 3 has to do with the silent schwa. You can see it there, paragraph 7 has to do with the silent schwa. Now we're already familiar with schwa. It's our semi-vowel or half vowel, and it gets half the time of a full vowel. And we've seen that there are a simple vocal schwa and then these compound vocal schwas. And they're the same, or they're identical in that they all get very, very short airtime. Before we come back and look at the rest of Kelley's explanation of things, let's look at a few examples out here. Here, the first example, number 6, is the word Yardain. Yardain. In this, we see that this word has two syllables in it. The division is sort of right there. And we see that this schwa is not actually pronounced. In fact, it's simply marking the end of the first syllable. Syllable like this is a closed syllable. It begins with a consonant, ya, in this case, and goes to the vowel, ya. And then closes off the first syllable, so yar. And the second syllable begins with the begad gefat letter dalet, dain, yar, dain. So we might have expected it to be pronounced something like yaredain, but in fact it's not. This is an example of a silent schwa that's marking the end of a syllable. When we look at number 8, we see the same thing going on. This first syllable starts with the m sound, goes through I, and ends up with sh, mish. And the next syllable starts with pa and goes on through tot, mishpat, mishpat. This is another example of a silent schwa. It's not actually pronounced mi-shapat. Instead, this silent schwa marks the end of a syllable and is silent, mish-pat. Another example here, number 11. Here's an example of a vocal schwa. It's right at the beginning. It can't end the syllable because it's beginning. It's right at the beginning in both of these cases, beginning a word, so it has to be pronounced. Tamuna, very short airtime. And in number 12, tefillah. Those are examples of vocal schwas. They're at the beginning of a syllable, whereas a silent schwa marks the end of a syllable. Let's go take a look then at Kelley's explanation. He says in the second paragraph, Hebrew also makes use of the silent schwa, written exactly like the simple vocal schwa. Boy, they're trying to make life hard for us with dageshes in both a lene and a forte. They look exactly the same. Here are schwas that look exactly the same, but in case of the schwa, they have entirely different purposes, the grammar says. A vocal schwa, whether simple or compound, will only stand beneath a consonant that begins a syllable, and the silent schwa, on the other hand, only stands beneath a consonant that ends a syllable. Silent schwa can also be referred to as a syllable divider, or it marks the end of a syllable. So whenever two schwas go walking, the second one does the talking. Whenever two schwas stand under adjacent consonants within a word, the first will always be silent, marking the end of the syllable in front of it, and the second will be vocal, marking the beginning of the next syllable. In other words, the first marks the end, second stands at the beginning. Let's go back and look at a couple more examples. These are taken from your exercises at the end of this chapter. Looking through this text from Exodus, and choth no is an example of a silent schwa. It marks the end of this syllable. Where's the next one? Second word in the second line. Look it over. What do you think it's going to be doing? Is it standing at the beginning of a syllable, in which case it's going to be pronounced, or is it standing marking the end of a syllable? If you said end of the syllable, you're right. Mid-yan, mid-yan. The next word, Vayinhag, likewise has a silent schwa. This is an open syllable, va, and then this one is a closed syllable, begins with a consonant, ends with a consonant, and this is marking the end of the syllable, yin, excuse me, va yin chag. Another word here, the first word in the third line, ha mid bar. Again, a silent schwa marking the end of this syllable. This is an open one because there's no consonant at the end, and when you're done with a syllable, your mouth is open, so they call this an open syllable. Ha. This one begins with a consonant and ends with a consonant, so it's called a closed syllable. And this schwa is marking the end of a consonant. Apparently the Masoretes didn't want to have any letter, especially one in a word, that didn't have some kind of a marker under it. So it's either got a vowel, or in this case, it's not actually even a vowel. It's just a silent schwa marking the end of the syllable. Well, hopefully that gives enough examples to get the idea of things. Let's go take a look at the quiz then. How do you write a silent schwa? Exactly the same way you write a vocal schwa, 2 dots, one above the other. Whereas the vocal schwa only stands beneath a consonant that begins a syllable, the silent schwa stands beneath a consonant that ends a syllable. And a schwa under a consonant with a dagesh forte in it is always going to be vocal, and that's because the dagesh forte is doubling the letter, and so it's marking both the end, that schwa, sort of imagine it with two consonants there. There's a schwa under both of them. It's doubled, and so there's it's marking the end of the first one and the beginning of the second one. But when a schwa stands under a consonant with a dagesh forte, it's always going to be a vocal schwa. So hopefully that gives you an introduction to the silent vocal schwa. This chapter, once again, has been a sort of a catch-all chapter with 4 very unrelated, distinct topics, 4 little bits that we need to be able to move ahead in our study of the Hebrew grammar, but don't be thinking that they're somehow closely related to one another. They're distinct from one another. Well, I'll look forward to seeing you next week.